Well, hello there, and welcome to our second lecture on the Theogony by Hesiod. In this lecture, we will focus on the rest of the Theogony, and I'll also be introducing the works and days, and specifically focusing on Pandora. So as you now know, I'm Dr. Christian Lehman, and this is the rest of Hesiod's Theogony, lines 618, sorry, it says 617, but it's 618 to 1022, as well as Pandora in the works and days. This is going to focus in particular on the idea of the Titanomachy and the Gigantomachy. They're the same thing. Titans and giants are used as synonyms. Essentially, what I want you to know is that this is a battle between the Olympians on one hand and previous generations on the other hand. So it's going to be the offspring of Uranos versus the offspring of Kronos. In that way, it's a generational conflict. And this fits into larger themes that we've been looking at about establishing hegemonic control over Mount Olympus. Again, hegemony is when you hold all the power in a society or political situation. And what we're going to be looking at is how Zeus maintains after gathering that power. And we'll be looking at the various strategies he deploys to gain it. When Uranos in his spirit first felt anger at his son, Briareus, at Kotos and at Gyges also, he bound them in chains, indignant at their proud virility and massive strength. He made them dwell beneath the broad-pathed earth, and there, beneath its farthest edge, these children of great girth sat idle for a long, long while, and much did they complain, feeling great anguish in their hearts, immense anguish and pain. But Zeus, the son of Kronos, and the other gods whom bright-haired Rhea bore to Kronos, brought them back up to the light, prompted by Gaia's cunning, for she told them the whole story, saying that, with the help of these three children, they'd win glory and carry off the conquest, splendid objects of their prayers. And spirit-grieving toil of doing battle had been theirs, and they had fought fierce combats for too long against each other. The Titan gods and those who had great Kronos for a father, these, from lofty Othrys, were the Titans of great fame, and those, the giver of all things good, from high Olympus came, whom bright-haired Rhea, having joined in love with Kronos, bore. We open immediately then with this sense that Uranos of that first generation, he didn't like a certain number of his sons, specifically these three, Briareus, Kotos, and Gyges. They're too strong, they're too powerful, they're too unwielding. As a result, he binds them in chains and he forces them to sit idle. This is essentially prison. And one of the things I want you to be thinking about is the idea of prison abolition as we move through this, right? It causes them anguish and complaint to be sitting there in this situation. That means their anger is going to increase. And then we get the setup. So Zeus is going to use them. Zeus is going to use their anger. And he's going to do it specifically as a result of Gaia's cunning, which introduces us to the idea of female knowledge. And ultimately, what we end up getting is the layout of the two sides. On one hand, we are going to have the Titans, and on the other, the Olympians, plus 3 Titans. And this is all spelled out for you right here. Zeus, in order to get their help, needs to appeal to these 3 Titans. Hear me, shining children of Gaia and Uranos, that I may speak the things the heart within me bids me say. For victory and mastery, we struggle every day. And it has been a long, long time we fought against each other, the Titan gods, and we who have great Kronos for a father. Now, make known to the Titans your resistless arms' vast force, as you oppose them in the grievous battle's mournful course, remembering our kind friendship and how many were your pains before you had reached the light once more, loosed from your cruel chains, and from the gloomy darkness through the action that we took. So what we have here, and what I want you to imagine on one hand, is those kind of earlier generations, those monsters, those Titans, versus our Olympians, here represented by Kylo Ren. And let's look at the tacit promise. Tacit means the silent, the unspoken promise that Zeus points out, right? He says, remember your pains when you had reached, and then how you felt when you came to the light. So he seems to imply, hey, there's going to be a place for you here in the light. After the battle, the Titans are victorious. And so here we have the Titans and the winners. Those winners specifically are Briareus, Kotos, and Gyges. And these they tied in grievous bands and sent beneath the broad-pathed earth. So what do? They imprison the losers, conquered by their hands, however overweening in their pride and insolent, as far beneath the earth as earth from sky as they were. All right, so this is just describing how far Tartarus is. And so it's the distance between the earth and the sky. That far below is where they go. As a result of this, in this prison, we get the question of who are their guards going to be? There, in that prison, Gyges, Kotos, and great-hearted Briareus dwell. The guards of aegis-bearing Zeus, they serve him faithfully. What has Zeus succeeded in doing? Well, he's sent them back down. He sent these Titans that are part of that previous generation to the same place as the losers of the fight. This means that Olympus is going to be inhabited only by those children of Kronos and the later generations. This is one way in which Zeus is using kind of prison policy in order to substantiate and maintain his reign. Let's look briefly, because we get a moment of a couple characters that are down there in Tartarus. The first one is going to be Cerberus, who will go unnamed, and yet this is a very early description of him. Beyond the echoing walls of Chthonian god are found. Chthonian means from the earth, from under the earth. And keeping watch outside them is a dreadful, ruthless hound. With wicked skill, he fawns on every victim that appears. He wags his tail for all of them and perks up both his ears. But none he lets go out again. He watches at all hours, and anyone who tries to leave, he seizes and devours. On the side here, I have two popular images from the internet that both engage with myths of Cerberus. The second one with Persephone and Hades will be more important when we turn to them and think about the way in which the modern internet culture has, in some problematic ways, reappropriated their story. That'll be the material for next week. Also pertinent is the river Styx. The river Styx is that by which the gods swear unbreakable vows. There dwells the goddess loathsome to the deathless ones, the dread daughter of circling Oceanus, Styx, his eldest bred, who far from the gods within her famous halls resides. But when, among the deathless ones, quarrels and strife arise, or if one of the daughters of Olympus should tell lies, then Zeus sends Iris. Iris is a messenger god associated with the rainbow, out to bring the great oath from afar. In a golden ewer, a ewer is a bowl by which the immortals swear the legendary icy water pouring from the height of steep rock raised aloft. So gods swear by the river Styx, by the water in the river Styx. And then we get a consequence. 4, if one of the gods who holds Olympus's snowy peak on pouring a libation of that sacred stream should speak falsely in oath, he lies. And this is the poet, the translator, Schlegel, is giving us a pun in English. We get lies to tell a lie, but then also lies as in to lay down. This is not in the Greek, all right? This is a translator adding an element in the English translation. And this person who lies, he lies there, not drawing breath the whole year long. He cannot eat ambrosia, and to nectar comes not near. But speechless and unbreathing on a bed, his spirit cowed, is covered up in evil coma, as within a shroud. For 9 long years, he doesn't join their feasts or councils, never. But in the 10th, he goes again and mingles with the gods. What we learn here is the consequence of telling a lie, breaking your oath, is what's called a social death. So, and it's 10 years. 10 years is like a decade, and it's a nice round number that you see a lot of 10-year stuff that happens in ancient literature. We also see it now, like with our fetish with decades. Think about like millennials and everything like that, boomers, etc. People love to divide generations. And the way this works is you have 1 year of being completely unconscious, almost coma-like, and then you kind of wake up, but you can't appreciate and you can't enjoy the things that gods get to have. But then it's all forgotten and you are good to go. After all of this, Zeus has one last task, and this is an odd thing because another monster arises. But after Zeus had driven out the Titans from the sky, remember who actually drove them out? Yeah, it was those three friends, but we're rewriting history here. Rewriting history. Prodigious Gaia bore her youngest child, Takoyas, by Tartarus, though brought about by golden Aphrodite. So here, this might seem odd, right? Gaia has been trying to help Zeus and suddenly brings this last one. So what we want to think about is how might this actually be a plot of Gaia? One of the things it does is it further establishes Zeus's reign, because there's always going to be the doubt that Zeus didn't actually achieve what he achieved previously on his own, and he's always going to need people. But what we have here with this moment is Zeus is the only person to defeat Takoyas, which means he deserves his right. As a result of all of this, Zeus gets chosen to lead. But when the blessed gods had finished laboring in due course, they settled the claim to honor of the Titans with brute force. And then it was they urged far-seeing Zeus the Olympian on Gaia's cunning counsel to be sovereign and to reign over the deathless ones. And he gave each what he was due. Here now comes Gaia's counsel again, right? That female knowledge. And this also invites us to think about that instance with Takoyas as a plot, as a plan. And what does Zeus do? He distributes time. That's a word for honor. And this is going to be part of the spheres of influence that we've been talking about and we will see more of. One of the things that we looked at in the last video was the way in which we had myths of succession. And so we start with Uranos being overthrown by Kronos, Kronos overthrown by Zeus. Zeus needs to stop that cycle of succession if he wants to maintain hegemony. Now Zeus, as king of gods, took Metis first to wife. She knew the most and was the wisest of the gods and death-born men. But when she was about to bear gray-eyed Athena, then he craftily deceived her with guileful speech, and down his belly thrust her to the very bowels. This was done on Gaia's shrewd advice and that of starry Uranos, for they too had made known to him that no one else but Zeus among the deathless gods should have the kingly privilege. But otherwise, there would have come a crafty lineage from her by fate. The gray-eyed Tritogenia of Athena first, whose force was equal to her father's and whose wisdom was not worse. And next, she would have borne a king of gods and men, a child having a proud and mighty spirit, passionate, strong-willed. But Zeus, before that happened, thrust her in his belly, so the goddess might advise him if a thing were good or no. So the goddess that he marries first, takes first to wife, Metis, her name actually means wisdom or knowledge or cunning, and that's why she's the most she's the wisest and knows the most. So she's a great threat. Remember all of this stuff, all of the threats that female knowledge have? Well, an older generation of a woman, Gaia, gave the advice that, hey, you need to stop this cycle of succession. And so Zeus swallows his wife Metis. Zeus swallows knowledge. And you'll remember another person that swallowed was Kronos. And this is all about making sure that Zeus maintains his rule, this autocracy. Among the deathless gods, only Zeus should have the kingly privilege. And then there's this threat, right? If he doesn't do anything about this, someday somebody will arise and overthrow the father. So Zeus makes sure that does not happen because Metis could give birth to a child that could overthrow him. This is also how we get the idea of Athena being born from his father, her father. And on his own, he bore gray-eyed Athena from his head, the feared Atritone, strife-stirring leader of the host, the lady whom the uproar of harsh warfare pleases most. So on his own, right? Another way in which this poem is showing us getting rid of the necessity for women. One of the problems in this poem is how many times women give the advice to lead to their own oppression. And that's part of the structures of misogyny. It's not just men that can hate women. Women can hate themselves and act against their own best interest. Briefly, while we're down here in the underworld, we have an ancient mention of Persephone and Hades. And again, this is important because of where we'll be going later in this course. Then to Demeter's bed he came, Demeter bountiful. She bore white-armed Persephone, whom Idoneus, that's Hades, from her mother's side did carry off, and Zeus gave her to him. So what we see here is kind of male allegiance, where Persephone is going to be stolen from her mother, and we're going to learn that Zeus has small permission. This is just 3 lines. We'll be looking next week at a Homeric hymn that elaborates on this at great extent. Let's move now to Hesiod's works and days. This is, as the title might imply, a description of how you should spend your day and why work is important. It is deeply, deeply patriarchal and misogynistic, and it's also kind of like a massive flame war against Hesiod's brother Perses. Then there's also good mythy stuff. Here's how it opens, though, with a description of 2 types of strife. 2 kinds of strife, that is conflict or struggle upon the earth, difficulties. Not one have always been. The first, if she were understood, men would accord her praise. Blameworthy is the other one. Their spirits divide asunder. Cruel, she fosters wicked war, battle, and heartless plunder. No mortals love this heavy strife, but by necessity they give her the honor she is due to please the gods on high. We're entering into a chiastic structure here. So we get told that there's a first kind that deserves praise. And then Hesiod says, but the second kind is blameworthy, and then elaborates on that blameworthiness by telling us that it's what causes war, right? So the idea with that strife is jealousy. It's somebody else has something and I want that something, and so I'm going to take it from them. So the bad kind of strife leads to plunder and taking. As for the other, she was Night's daughter, dark Night's eldest birth. Kronos' son, high benched in the ether, rooted her deep in the earth. Better by far she is to men than the other kind. Even the shiftless man she stirs to work. Who else would give it no mind? A man who has no work in hand, if he should see another rushing to plow and plant his fields and put his house in order, in envy of his neighbor's wealth, will seek prosperity. This strife is good for mortal men. You see the reason why. Potter for dominance contends with potter, joiner with joiner, even beggar vies with beggar. Singer competes with singer. So in the first kind then, which is the praise, is about effort. It's the idea that, oh, I see somebody has something. Instead of taking that thing, I will work harder and gain it. The second kind of strife is plunder. And that's shameful, right? That's the idea that, oh, somebody else has something, I'm going to take it from them. The most important section here, though, and what we want to focus on, is the creation of Pandora. And this is going to pick up on some of what we saw in the Theogony when we had the creation of a woman who went unnamed in the Theogony, but will be named here. Then the cloud gatherer in rage addressed the Titan, this is Prometheus, thus: your schemes surpass all other schemes, son of Iapetus. Now you rejoice at having stolen fire, outwitting me. Much misery both for yourself and men to be. To them in recompense for fire, I shall bequeath a woe, which they will cherish in their hearts, although it lays them low. So spoke the father of gods and men, and laughed out loud. Then bade means to command, request, bade Hephaestus, the famed artisan, at once to mix and knead water and earth, and put in strength and speech distinctly human. Make it an aspect like a deathless goddess, but a woman, a lovely maiden, and in her form desirable to men, and bade Athena to teach her how to ply the loom, and then bade golden Aphrodite pour grace on her shining hair, and painful longing and regret and limb-devouring care. Last, to put in a currish mind and thievish character, commanded Hermes, slayer of dogs, Hermes the messenger. And so in this section, we get the creation of Pandora. And to create her, what Zeus does is he commands each god to use something according to their spheres of influence and bring it about. And so Athena teaches her how to ply the loom, and that's a craft. Aphrodite makes her beautiful, but also fills her full of, so we have work and craft We have lust here with this idea of filling her with limb-devouring care. And last, they put in her a currish mind and thievish character. A cur is a dog. And this is where one of the origins of the idea that bitch is a pejorative used against women as part of a misogynistic discourse. So as you'll discover in this passage with the creation of woman, we also are really embedding this poem with themes of misogyny, and it's also hyper hetero, right? There's nothing here that says like, oh, women are going to like cause lust in other women. This is all about Hesiod kind of centering himself as a patriarch and viewing women as people that suck down resources, which is an element we talked about last time. So spoke his lordship, Cronian Zeus. They did as they were told. Look at that kind of acquiescence. Already Zeus's rule is established. And from the earth forthwith, the famous dexterous one did mold the likeness of a modest maid by Cronos' son's design. Remember, so you've seen other places where you create humans out of dirt and mud. It's the commonplace. The gray-eyed goddess, Athena, did adorn and dress her. The divine graces and revered persuasion placed upon her skin golden chains and necklaces. The fair-haired Hours did twine garlands of flowers about her head, the freshest they could gather. And Pallas Athena, on her skin, fit all these things together. Then in her breast, the slayer of dogs, Hermes the messenger, fashioned lies and wheedling words and a thievish character. And the gods as herald gave her a voice by the thunderer's design, and called this woman the all-gifted one, Pandora, because the divine Olympians all gave her a gift, and as a gift did give her as a woe to mortal men who must earn their bread to live. So we end the story, this part here, with woman as a woe. And notice what we've done is we've kind of reversed all of those commands and we just kind of said them again. But a particular thing that Hermes adds is fashioning lies and wheedling words. So here we set up more of that misogynistic discourse of women lie. And remember how we had the river Styx earlier? And this becomes interesting because in women, lies are seen as something that is terrible and harmful. But let's jump back a couple of slides. And that is here, where when Zeus is ending the cycle of succession, he deceives with guileful speech. So when Zeus does it, oh, it's a good thing. Double standards. And now we get the most famous section. And I've written here Pandora's Jar. You've probably all heard the phrase Pandora's box. That happens through a mistranslation. So if you really want to make friends, next time you hear somebody say Pandora's box, you correct them with this passage, and then they will be endeared to you forever. Trust me, I know. You are taking this myth class to learn how to make friends. To Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus, you'll remember, whose name means afterthought. To Epimetheus with the gift he sent the messenger. And Epimetheus did not consider what his brother Prometheus had warned concerning gifts from Zeus, that rather than keep what the Olympian gave, send them back again, lest somehow they turn out to be a woe to mortal men. Holding the woe he had received, he knew it only then. For previously, the tribes of men lived happily on earth, remote from suffering, from painful labor, and from dearth, and all the baleful maladies that bring life to an end. Before the woman lifted off the jar's lid with her hand and scattered out its contents, bringing humans grievous pain. And only hope in its own. So let's stop there. Right. So here's the story that we have. Once upon a time, there were no women, and men were happy and awesome and just kind of like hanging out, broing hard. Pandora lifts off the jar, and notice how this passage is going to give a lot of agency to Pandora. She's the active agent here, right? This is active voice. She lifts the jar and she scatters it. And this is where like woe and suffering, disease, everything else comes into the world. And only hope in its unbroken dwelling did remain. Inside the jar, beneath the rim away, it never flew. She thrust the lid back on the jar before that could ensue, as Zeus, the Aegis-bearing god, gatherer of clouds, designed. So here we have a very famous moment, and this is a huge point of debate. What is hope? Well, for Emily Dickinson, hope is a thing with feathers that perches on the soul and sings a tune without a word and never stops at all. But we're back in Greece. So this is a point of debate, and it's good for you. You can enter into it. Is hope staying in the jar? Does that mean that we have access to hope? Or does hope staying in the jar means that hope is not released upon the world? It's a point of interpretation. And you should think about it and think about how you can use different parts of the poem to support your idea. And then we get a short catalog of some of these woes that she released. But troubles that are numberless wander among mankind. The earth and sea are full of ills, of things to be abhorred. Diseases come by day and night and of their own accord. Continually they come to men in silence, bearing woe. For Zeus the cunning took their voices long ago. So all attempts to flee the mind of Zeus are bound to fail. I'll tell you what, that line hits a lot harder this year than it's ever hit before. And with that, I look forward to moving on to the Homeric hymns to Hermes and to Demeter next week with all of you. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed spending time with Hesiod.